वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं हरि ओम. We'll chant some of these names of Swami Chinmayananda. Om Sumanase Namaha.
Om Sumanase Namaha.
Om Suhrade Namaha.
Om Suhrade Namaha.
Om Swayam Jyotishe Namaha.
Om Swayam Jyotishe Namaha.
Om Stita Prajnaya Namaha.
Om Stita Prajnaya Namaha.
Om Kshama Shilaya Namaha.
Om Kshama Shilaya Namaha.
Om Jnanamurtaye Namaha.
Om Jnanamurtaye Namaha.
Om Jnanayogine Namaha.
Om Jnanayogine Namaha.
See, the 108th name is at the bottom. So I know I prepared for Jnana Yogini, but this is showing that it's the second last one, which means that in my head I thought we skipped a name somewhere. But no, we're on 106, correct. So this Jnana Yogini, and the one salutations to the one who is established in this Jnana, in this knowledge. Right, so we have Karma Yoga, we have Bhakti Yoga, and we have Jnana Yoga, for instance, in this Bhagavad Gita. So Karma Yoga is that wisdom of action. Right, how am I supposed to perform my action? Right, what am I supposed to do so that that action that I perform unites my entire personality? That Bhakti Yoga is that knowledge or that wisdom of devotion. And Bhakti is such an interesting thing. We mix up love and devotion. Two different things. It could transform into love. We can understand love from that higher perspective. But our love is conditional. I love Bhagwan until someone near me passes away. Then I want to know why Bhagwan went and did that to me. And then this Jnana Yoga. And Bhagwan presents this so nice and sequence. So that Karma Yoga is first, then Bhakti Yoga is there, developing my love. And then that last one is that Jnana Yoga. That Jnana Yoga means that knowledge. Knowledge of what? Of the Shastras. Swami Chinmayananda, Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda, we just heard, Ganeshji told us that when someone asked 76-year-old Gurudev, how are you doing? He replied and he said, well, physically I'm not so good. But spiritually, intellectually, at the core of my being, I'm good as ever. Still ready to go. Us, all we have to do is we have to break a leg. We have to fall ill, get the flu. And what happens? We say, oh God, somebody bring me soup. I have nobody to take care of me. Where did all my children go? And all kind of thing. Oh, we have to get a little flu somewhere, a little virus we get. And we think our whole world is done. Why? Because we've identified with this body. We go running after the things of this world because we think that our happiness lies in that object. That's why we go and we build the biggest house, or we buy more than, 10 cars, or we have a few cell phones in our pocket, or we have 2 wardrobes full of clothes, and 10 more cupboards full of shoes. Right? We think the happiness is in the object. But Gurudev, or the Mahatma, the one who is established in the yoga and the wisdom of this knowledge, he knows that that happiness only lies in myself. I'm the one who placed that happiness in that object. Or I'm the one who's placing that sorrow in that body. I identify with this body. I think that I'm nothing more than this body. So when I get sick, then my whole world ends. That's the end of me. So Gurudev was beyond all this. He understood the world exactly as it is. He didn't superimpose his own perceptions, his own impressions. He understood the world exactly as it is. Right? I will use this cell phone, I will use this car, I'll wear these clothes for transactional purposes. I need to make a phone call, this is how I'll be able to connect with that person. They didn't go and become attached to it. So this quality is one that we have to imbibe. We have to hold it as an ideal. 106 names later, we have 106 minimum qualities to hold as our ideal. So one who is established in the Jnana, right? Hanumanji, I've told Hanumanji, he had darshan of Lord Ram. Okay, so he saw Lord Ram in India. So Lord Ram represents what? Atma Jnana. He represents the knowledge of the self. But he wasn't okay with that. That's called book knowledge. So he had to get darshan of Mother Sita. And Mother Sita represents that, or she symbolizes that Shanti, the peace of that Jnana. So it became wisdom after. So he had to cross that ocean of samsara to get that Shanti. So book knowledge is not okay. I mean, it's okay for some extent, but to embody that knowledge is what we're gaining, is what we're trying to achieve. When we embody that knowledge and it becomes our wisdom, then we have no more suffering. Right? Easy is when to, we don't have to learn how to breathe. Breathing comes so naturally. When we learn how to live, when we understand the world for what it is, then we live accordingly. And it becomes second nature to us. It becomes our nature actually, not even second nature. It becomes our inherent nature. We act accordingly to that thing. So that Jnana Yogini, he was one who was established in that Jnana, the yoga of the, Yogine, that word comes from Yuj. Yuj means to unite. Right? It means to unite. So when it is that I am going against my inherent nature, so when it is I think happiness is outside of me, right, and I identify with sorrow, with greed, with jealousy, with anger, meaning that whole thing just overcomes me. In Bhaja Govindam, Adi Shankaracharya ji, he tells us that the angry man, the one who becomes angry, he doesn't even recognize himself. So identified he is with his emotion, or with that object, or with whatever situation just occurred. So identified that he doesn't even recognize himself in that anger. That's why when we get angry, then afterwards we go and we apologize. We say, oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Please forgive me. We don't recognize ourselves. So that means that when we're going against our nature, that yuj, that unification, we go against our nature, and that means that we're creating agitation in our own mind, in our own personalities. So this Jnana Yogini, that means to unite all the personalities. How? By knowledge. Right? Hinduism isn't a blind faith. We understand exactly what it is that we are studying. And by that, then we unite our personality. So we've reached 106 days of Gita Jnana Yajna, Maha Jnana Yajna. And we've reached chapter 18, thankfully. We have a few more days left, so thankfully we've reached at least, the end of Bhagavad Gita, or the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And we're on verse 40. Well, we finished verse 45 last night. 45, right? Somewhere in Bukhara we were. And Bhagwan is teaching Arjuna. Well, he begins in this last chapter, chapter 18. What is the difference between Tyaga and Sannyas? So Bhagwan, easily Bhagwan says, with more difficulty we explain and try to understand. But Bhagwan says essentially the essence of what Tyag is renunciation of our likes, of our dislikes, of our attachment to fruit of action. So when it is that we do any action, we have something that we expect in return. Right? So if I help someone, I expect that in my time of need, they'll also help me. Right? Or I go and I buy this car because I expect this thing will run smoothly and take me from point A to Z. Not to B or C, but all the way down to Z. So we have attachment to the fruits of our actions, with the results of what our actions will do. So Tyag is renouncing all of these things. Right? It means that we renounce all of those things. And then sannyas is, so there's someone who is attached to that thing. Right? So I am happy because this has happened. Or I am, detached from all of this. So sannyas is that renunciation of the ego, that I-ness or that my-ness. So Arjuna asked this question in the beginning. Why? Because this is the key to what is happiness. Bhagavan says for 17 chapters, he tells exactly how it is you're supposed to live in this world, what vision of this universe you're supposed to have, what vision of life you're supposed to have. And it's always easier said than done. Anything is always easier said than done. So Bhagavan says, okay, there's a difference between what tyaga and sannyas is, but this is what we are aiming for. Because this is how we will attain happiness. Because remember, Arjuna is right now, he's on that field in confusion, in fear, in sorrow, because he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to live up to what his abilities are. So Bhagavan tells him that these are the difference, and he asks because he is unhappy. So Bhagavan says that you have to correct the vision, your vision of what the world is. Correct your vision. Right now we have a vision of the world, and we are absolutely sure that that is the correct thing. Right? We are completely sure that that thing is nothing, it can't be anything different. That's why we go into temples, or we hear, priests or pundits or anybody on radio or on television. Those advertisements will sometimes come up on television, and we'll hear them preaching, and they're preaching the way that the scriptures will teach us how to understand this world. And we say, no, that can't be the correct thing. I have my understanding, and my understanding is the correct thing. What they're saying, they don't know what they're talking about. They live in the temple. They live in the mountains. They live in the church. How will they know what this real world is about? So that's the incorrect vision, actually, of the world. Bhagavan says you have to fix your vision. Fix that thing and make it correct. Correct meaning according to the Shastras. That is why he brings in the gunas, right? The three different qualities that make up this entire world. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. In every single thing, the air that we're breathing, our body, our clothes, every single thing that we can possibly think of, our thoughts, have some element of these three gunas in them. And so right now, the majority of us, we have Rajo and Tamo guna predominant in our personalities. So that's why Bhagavan brings up these gunas, and then he says, okay, this whole world is made up of these different qualities, and there is certain castes that we fall into, that we are classified under. And once it is that we figure out what caste it is that we are, or what varna ashrama that we belong to, then by doing those duties properly, then we lift our guna from Rajo and Tamas to Sattva. Right now, the way that we do dana, the way that we give charity, right, the way that we do sacrifice or yajna, the way that we do our actions, they are of Rajo or Tamasic gunas. Right? So, for instance, if I'm doing yajna, then I expect that, some sort of thing will be in return. So, if I'm a student, I go and I do puja. Because I expect Mother Saraswati, by doing these prayers and saying it so sincerely, I will get, 99% on my exam. Or that tamasic mind will go and do yajna just for show. He doesn't care that, he's, by inviting all these devotees to that satsang or to that puja, he's creating better contributors of this world. He doesn't care about that this pandit is getting to bring blessings in his home. He doesn't care about any of that. He just wants to do it for show. He wants name and fame. And these things are so subtle in our personality. These three gunas are in every single person. So Bhagavan says, well, right now we're at that level, and that's okay. It's a ladder. It's a process. And here's how we can make everything sattvic, or predominantly sattvic. So he says that we correct our vision of the world. When we correct our vision of the world, then we understand what quality our actions are at, and then we allow it to rise. And it's not something to be offended by. Right? It's not something to be offended by. It's not, I'm a tamasic person and, I don't belong here. Or, I'm going to go somewhere where I feel better about myself. That's not, Bhagavad Gita is for introspection. If it is that your clothes has a hole in it, or it's out of style, or, it's faded, whatever it might be, it's old, then you go and you mend that clothing. Right? You sew it back together, or you get a new piece of clothing. Right? So you replace it with something up to date, something better that will make it better. So we're at this level, and there's something that is offered to us. We have the opportunity to make ourselves better, so we take that opportunity. We thrive on that opportunity. And then we lift ourselves by ourselves. And when it is that we correct our actions, we correct our vision, then that allows us to do the correct action. And when we do our actions, the correct actions, that falls under our Varna. Which caste that is that we belong to. So Brahmana is there. We saw earlier on Brahmana, that caste or that ashrama has certain duties that are aligned to it. And those duties are very subtle. They're inner qualities. So for instance, that Shama, that Dhamma, Tapas, right? So control of the mind, the senses, doing everything as a sacrifice or as an offering, hardship, right? All those qualities, those are inner qualities that have to be imbibed so that then they are exalted as physical actions. And the Kshatriya is there. Kshatriya is one who, is like one who upholds justice in society, essentially. Right? So the Brahmanas, if we look at this in our modern day, the Brahmanas are like the lawmakers. Right, in our government system, the lawmakers, they sit down and they write the laws. They say this is justice, this is not justice. And the Kshatriyas, they're the politicians. So they ensure that these laws are put into place. Right, and the Kshatriyas, they're still sattvic. Right, that sattva guna is there in a high amount in their personality, in their jiva. But that rajaguna also takes precedence. So it makes that sattva guna more expressive, actually. Right? That sattva guna is more expressive. So they want to uphold justice, so they find ways to make sure that thing is done. Whereas a brahmana, for instance, he will just try and exalt that dharma, or that correct thing. And if it's not done, then so be it. The kshatriya will ensure that that thing is put into place. And then the Vaishya we saw, that's when that rajoguna is more and that sattva guna is less. So then it expresses as creativity, it expresses as productivity. So that Vaishya we know as the businessman. So in any opportunity he creates. Right? He'll walk in, so he'll from something natural he'll be able to sow seeds and build agriculture. He's a protector of wealth, the creator and the protector of wealth in society, which is very important. That Shudra is, and that Shudra is, when that Tamo Guna is more, then it expresses as a desire for seva, for service in society. So these 4 ashramas are there, these 4 Varna ashrama, and it's not to look at somebody and say, you belong to that Shudra, or you're a Vaishya and I'm a Brahmin, so I'm higher than you. And that's been misconstrued over centuries. That's incorrect. Bhagavan has classified every single man in every single time period under these 4. And it's simply, if you are attuned to one, then you follow the duties that are in that category. If you are not more attuned to that, then you don't bother with it. But every single person in this room is more attuned to 1 or 2 of these Varna ashramas. And we have all 4 of them in us. That Shudra is the laborer. He's the one who performs the action. He executes those actions. The majority of us are working under someone else. So we have that Shudra ashrama in us also. Right? But then we could also think for ourselves that Brahmana ashrama is there. We make sure that the bills are paid at the end of the month. That Vaishya ashrama is there. And all these different are there in each and every one of us, but it's not to, how the caste system has been misconstrued today. It's not to look down on anyone else. Bhagwan, this is simply classification and you follow those things. If you're a doctor, then you wouldn't go and make laws. Right? You will go and provide services in the hospital and the medical center. That's your duty as a doctor. Right? Or if you're a lawyer, then you're not to go and do a citizen's arrest on every single person that you see. That's the duty of a policeman. So very simply, we are classified in certain ashramas, and those are the duties that we are to follow. Right? That's the action. Then we also have, the other ashrama, right? So brahmachari stage is there, then grihastha, then vanaprastha, then sannyas. Those are different ages that we go through in this life. So that's also there. So there are duties that are also aligned with that. So we follow these duties properly. When we follow these duties properly, then what happens? Bhagwan tells us, well, throughout Bhagavad Gita, but he renumerates it again here in this chapter 18. The human mind, we need repetition over and over and over again. For instance, in this Vedanta course that we do in Trinidad and in India, for 2 years the Acharya will tell the same thing over and over in different ways, but over and over and over again. That Upanishad, after, Bhagwan teaches all the highest knowledge. And at the end, the student asks, so when are you going to teach me Jnana? When are you going to teach me this highest knowledge? So we need repetition. So Bhagwan in this chapter 18, he goes over this entire Bhagavad Gita again. So we'll chant from verse 46. Chapter 18, verse 46. Yata pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmanatamabhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha. So in the last verse, Bhagwan said that our swabhav is there. Right? The reason why we can fall into these different classifications is because of our something called swabhav. So I am more attuned to upholding justice in society. If it is that my siblings were fighting at home growing up, I was the one who will go in between and try and mediate between the two. Or, if it is somebody who plays tabla or dholak, or is so good at just, that tal, keeping tal. That's not something that they just, Bhagwan just decided to bless them with in this life. That's something that they have developed over lifetime. So in this lifetime, it's intrinsic for them. It's very natural for them. That swabhav is there, a natural tendency. So Bhagwan says that we have to understand what our swabhav is, so that we can fall into these classifications, figure out which varna ashrama we belong to, and then we express that swabhav through our karma. We have to express that swabhav, express our natural tendencies, our natural inclinations through our karma, through our actions. And then now Bhagwan, he tells us what is required to make those actions karma yoga. We can do actions as much as we want, but the wrong attitude is what will make all the difference. Right? The wrong attitude is what will make all the difference. If that mother takes care of that child but shows no love, then that child will be at a loss. That child will yearn for love. She could feed that child, clothe that child, bathe that child, house that child. But the child will be at a loss. So it's the intention that we do the action with. It's the inclination that we do our actions with. So what is karma yoga? Bhagwan tells us in this verse 46. So he says, Bhagwan says that one has to dedicate all our actions to Ishvara, to Tam, Ishvara. So who is Ishvara? Right? We hear that word. We hear Bhagwan all the time. We hear the Lord all the time. Brahman we might hear, but Ishvara. Who is Ishvara? Ishvara is that all-pervasive reality that is only indicated in our shastras. Ishvara is that all-pervasive reality that is only indicated. So yata pravrittihi bhutanam. So Ishvara is the one where every single thing in this world comes from. Every single thing in this world comes from Ishvara. From our thoughts to our body, to the plants, to the insects, from the insect to the devatas in this universe also. Everything comes from this embodiment called Ishvara. And he's the origin of all beings, and he is the origin of all the activities that the beings will perform. So all the actions that we perform is only because of Ishvara also. You know how, we like to use that word, I created. Or this person created that thing. Graham Bell created the telephone. Right? So we like to say created, but according to our Shastras, there's absolutely nothing new in this world. There's nothing new in this world. And where did the thought that came into your head to create that thing come from? Right? That's the depth that our Shastras go to. That is the depth that Vedanta takes us. Right? We ask these questions, when it is that we go to sleep, right? So the sleeping stage, and then we go into deep sleep. And then you wake up and you said, oh, I had a good sleep last night. You wake up and you say, I had a good sleep last night. But who was awake during that deep sleep period? Who is it that knows that you had a good sleep last night? Because as far as you're concerned, you were sleeping through that entire thing. In deep sleep too. So who is it that knows? Who it is that is aware? So that reality that pervades everything, that Ishvara that is there. So all of creation had to come from somewhere. It didn't come from the Big Bang Theory. It didn't come from nothing at the beginning of time. Right? You have to think logically. That also doesn't make sense. What's the beginning of time? Beginning indicates that there was some sort of time. So what time was before that beginning? How do they know that was the beginning or the creation of time? So in our Shastras, in Hinduism, in Sanatana Dharma, there's the manifester, the sustainer, and the one who dissolves. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. But we like, this Western notion, we say one who has created, one who sustains, and one who destroys. Right? But a nice example is, that mango seed, right? The mango seed that's there, there's a mango tree inside of that mango seed. Right? There's a mango tree that's inside of that mango seed, but we just can't see it. It is in unmanifest state. So that mango seed, when that tree comes out, then it is in manifest state. And then it will be sustained by all the elements. And then it will go into unmanifest after how many years or centuries? So very simply, that is exactly how our universe works. So who is the one who is sustaining this entire universe? Where did all of these things come from? The thought to create something was already there existing in Ishvara's mind, in the cosmic mind. So all our thoughts, all the activities to do any action is already there existing, and we just catch it. You know how in Trinidad we say, I dream straight? I dream straight, so you'll dream a number, and then you'll go and play it and play away the next day. And then you'll win, but you only play for $2 because you don't know if you'll... So when you dream straight, right, who's to say that you, in that sleeping state, who's to say that you also did not tap into that cosmic mind? That means that your mind is so quiet, your mind is so at peace. So the one who, that cosmic mind is already holding on every single instance that could possibly happen in this universe. And that entity is embodied by Ishvara, as Bhagwan says in this 18th chapter. Actually, he doesn't even say, he says it is indicated. It is because our small minds can't comprehend something so limitless. Our mind is limited, no? Our mind is limited. We say, oh, we want to believe in aliens. Aliens might exist, and it's interesting to listen to and talk about. But until you really see one, you have no intention of believing that thing. And even if you see one, then you'll say, well, technology these days. Technology and science. I don't know if that thing really came from Mars. So we want to see. So our mind is so limited. It can't go beyond its barriers. Bhagwan is beyond every single thing that we can possibly comprehend. Our mind also cannot comprehend the vastness of the Lord. So this Ishvara is indicated, right? It's an indicator. So the source itself cannot be comprehended. So it's like, in Vedanta we have that nice example of the snake and the rope. So if or that cord is there. So when I see that cord or that rope, I say a snake is there. I can't see properly, so I say a snake is there. My vision is thwarted. So, the same way the rest of this universe comes, that snake has emerged from that rope, and it's also sustained by that rope. And then when I get the correct vision, then it merges back into that same rope. How? Because only when a wise man comes and tells me, no, you don't see the rope there. This whole time I'm only thinking, look, a snake, a snake, a snake. How will I save myself, a snake? But the wise man will come and tell me, no, look at that piece of rope lying there. And then suddenly your vision changes. You know, sometimes on social media you'll see a picture and it says, do you see the horse? And then you look at it and you see a garden. A garden with, well-placed flowers. And you have to stare at that thing, you have to turn your computer upside down, turn your head upside down, and then finally you see that horse, or whatever animal they're telling you to see. But you would never even think of that thing until it was indicated. So the same way this whole universe, it merges out from that Ishvara, from that Bhagwan, from that sustenance. It is sustained by that thing and then it dissolves right back, as though. It merges back in as though. So this is the fine-tuning of what Karma Yoga is. Right? Bhagwan says, don't forget at the beginning, Bhagwan says to dedicate all the actions to Ishvara. Right? Dedicate all actions to Ishvara. So, it's at the end of the day, then you go home and you say, Bhagwan, I offer my day's work to you. Or while you're working, then you say, Bhagwan, I'm only doing this for you, And then you reach that level where you say, I am not even there. Bhagwan is just working through this body. My ego is completely dissolved. So the correct notion of that Karma Yoga is you dedicate all your actions to Bhagwan, to Ishvara. That is the first stage that we can attune ourselves to. So when we work, when we do karma, we should be attuned to that source. The source who's even allowing us to work. The source who's giving us the energy to work. The source who's giving us the opportunity to do that work. The source who is even providing that work to be existent. So when our mind, when our work, when our intellect, when our ego is attuned to that source, then it becomes Karma Yoga. Otherwise, then it's just me and you doing this work and we get attachments, we get sorrow, right? Our ego keeps growing and growing and growing. And from that, then our likes and our dislikes are there, our vasanas are there. We don't exhaust anything, we just keep building and building and building. So, that source is what we are supposed to keep our mind to. It's like that electricity is there to power that refrigerator, so that it can cool the contents. If that electricity was not there, then that thing would just be a box with shelves. And all your butter and cheese and everything would go bad. So if that now the inanimate object can't keep its mind on the electricity, but we, as objects of intellect, as human beings, as mammals with human beings, then we can keep our mind on that supreme source. And it takes time, it takes practice. Bhagwan didn't say, after this satsang, then you go home and you'll be good. It says it takes time. So, Bhagwan says that if you act in this way, if you act with this mind of Karma Yoga, with this intention of Karma Yoga, then your mind becomes free. Free how? Because then it becomes pure. It's no longer agitated by what you are doing. It's no longer agitated by the fruits of the action that you will be performing. It's like when you work in a company, in your mind you know that there's a boss. The CEO is there. But you don't really have any interaction with him. That CEO probably also lives in a different country. You don't have any interaction with him, but your mind is, I need to finish this so that I don't get fired, or my boss needs this thing. Your interaction is very limited, but your mind is that the boss is there now. The same thing applies to this Karma Yoga. Right? Your boss man is Bhagwan. And your job is this entire life. And so keeping your mind on Bhagwan through your entire life, through every action that you do, even while you're at work. Your boss also has a boss, and his name is Ishvara, Lord Krishna, Lord Shiva. Right? Whoever you're attuned to. So keeping your mind on that source, then that thing becomes karma yoga. And what happens? Then your doership drops. That sense of I am doing, I am the enjoyer. It's me who's doing this and nobody else. Bhagwan doesn't know what he's talking about with this law of karma. I'm creating my own destiny, my own fate. I have my own free will. So that sense of doership goes. When that sense of doership goes, then our swabhav becomes our intrinsic, spontaneous nature. Right now we go against our swabhav because we want to live up to society standards. Right? We don't want to be just a laborer or an employee. We want to rule the company. We want to go higher and higher as far as we can. Then we want to mix up all of our classifications also. So Bhagwan says, stick to your varna ashrama, do those duties properly, and then as you're doing them, then offer everything back to Bhagwan. As you offer everything back to Bhagwan, then your doership goes. You have no identity with it, you have no ego attached to it. And then what does that do? It creates a purification of your mind. That purification of the mind then allows your swabhav to just flow through you spontaneously. At first, it's like, when you're cooking something new, matar paneer. Right, matar paneer. When you're cooking something first for the first time, then you have to follow that recipe. You have to say, okay, add this amount of this, add so much of this, mix for this long, let it cook for this amount of time, and then let it cool, and you have to keep referring back to that recipe. But when it is you practice that thing enough times, then it becomes second nature to you. You no longer have to refer to anything. You could do it with your eyes closed also, over and over again. So in Bhagwan, he's there and he's very patient. Acharyas are very patient. Mahatmas are very patient. Over and over again, that student continues asking the same question. And that student, also goes with his doubts. He goes with his own perceptions. So remember in the beginning, Arjuna, he didn't want to fight on that battlefield. He said, let me, go and meditate in the Himalayas. Let me leave here. We don't need to fight them. Leave them. They don't know what they're doing. Let's not lower ourselves to their level. So Arjuna continues. His doubt is still there in his mind. And he says, he wants to know why it is that he still can't go and meditate. He understands all of this. Lord Krishna, I understand. But why is it I still can't go and meditate? Tell me. So Bhagwan tells him in verse 47. Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha
Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha
paradharmat swanushthitat
Paradharmat swanushthitat
swabhavaniyatam karma
Swabhavaniyatam karma
kurvanapnoti kilbisham.
Kurvanapnoti kilbisham.
So what does Bhagwan say? He says, Swadharmaha vigunaha shreyan paradharmatsu anushtitat. He says, Arjuna, he says, performing your own duty, one's own duty, though it might be blemished, though it might have its faults attached to it, though it might be tainted, is superior to doing anyone else's duty very well. So doing your own duty, as bad as it might be, as blemished as it might be, is far superior, is far better, is incredibly higher than doing someone else's duty very well. So in our lives, Bhagwan is talking to us, right? Arjuna represents us. So Bhagwan is saying that we want to be something else than what we really are. So for instance, there's many people that you'll meet in your life, and whatever job that they're doing, they're always fearful. Is my boss going to fire me? Or is this person going to, go and tell my boss something? Or, am I going to get caught? Or how many days can I take off again? Right, all kind of fears they have, and it manifests in so many different ways. They'll go and, I used a different example, and some of the chicks thought I was talking about someone who I knew, but it was, you're so scared of somebody else getting a promotion that you don't tell them when the office meeting is. Right? But now you don't have any self-assertiveness in your own ability because you're doing someone else's duty. You're doing something that you are not naturally inclined to do. Something that you are not naturally inclined to do. So Bhagavan says that even if it is that you are doing something that you are not naturally inclined to do, and you do that thing very, very well, it is still lower than doing your own swadharma, than doing what your own natural inclination is. So from the highest standpoint, right, each guna has their defect. So for instance, something cannot only be sattvic, but that raja guna and that tamo guna will be there with that sattva. So that raja guna means that you're always moving, or you're thinking before you speak, very, very fast. Or that tamo guna means that you're always sleeping, or you're not thinking clearly, right? Or you're not thinking at all, either one. Right? So these all have their defects, which are fine. But Bhagavan is saying that you still go ahead and you do your duty. No matter what it might be, you do your duty. So this caste system that we have, with that hierarchy that has been implemented, right, by the misconstruction of, society over the centuries. Bhagavan speaks of that here also. He indicates that this problem might arise, but it's not something to go and change what your natural inclination is. Like, if that child is so good at doing art, right, art or playing music, whatever it might be, and that a family pushes him to become a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, right, he will never be as happy as he is doing those jobs than when he is playing that tabla or drawing a painting a piece of art and drawing a painting. Right? He will never be as happy. He might do those things well, but he will never be as happy. He won't do as well as he possibly could if he was doing these artistic things in the first place. So Bhagavan is saying whatever your duty is, whatever your inclination is, you do that thing properly and you do that thing well. When it is that you do someone else's duty, do something that is other than what your natural inclination is, it's called paradharma. Paradharma. Right? And when it is that you do paradharma, really essentially is that you're trying to imitate somebody else. Right? You're trying to imitate something that you are not. Trying to be something that you are not. But really there's only one of you. Right? There's one of somebody else also. That person is already made in. Now there's you. That's like, no matter who you're trying to imitate God also. You're trying to imitate Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, the Lord Shiva. Then you'll run into some trouble. You have to go drink poison and keep that in your throat. But you're doing something that is completely opposed to what your true nature is. That means that you're also lying to yourself. Bhagavan says in that 16th chapter that you're also hurting him. Right? If Ishvara is all pervasive, he's also in yourself, and you are doing the adharmic thing to yourself, then you are also hurting Bhagavan in those actions. So you should express your varna, right? That's what the classifications are there for. Like, for each teacher has their own style. If all the teachers were the exact same, that means a teacher who yells a lot, or a teacher who talks in monotone the whole time, or a teacher who only likes to do arts and crafts through the entire class. If every teacher was only one of these qualities, right? Variety is there for a reason. So it's not the action that is important. It's not the action that we perform that is important. It's the swabhav that is expressed through that action. So in any duty that we take up, it's our natural inclination that should be expressed through that thing. Meaning that if you're doing something other than what you are naturally inclined to do, then you are no longer exhausting any vasanas. You're only creating more and more and more for yourself. And when you create more and more vasanas, more impressions, more likes and dislikes, then it's a never-ending cycle. Right? Human beings, we like to complicate our happiness. We make our happiness very complex. We'll never settle for any one thing. Our greed is so much. When we get one thing, then we want more of it. Or we say that thing expires for some time and then we need more and more. We make our happiness very complex. If it is that you do your duties according to your varna ashrama, then you are exhausting all these vasanas. You no longer create new ones, but you are just exhausting them. If it is you like to boss people around and you get put as a CEO, eventually your mouth will get tired. You exhaust that vasana, for instance. So Bhagavan is saying, don't worry about what action or what varnashrama or what guna is good or bad. Forget about good or bad, actually. From the highest standpoint, there's no such thing as good or bad. Everything is exactly as is. It's us who superimposes good or bad on something. Right? We put value to everything in this universe. So Bhagavan says, don't worry about what is good or bad. You do your duty and you do what you are good at. And when you're doing what you're good at, do that thing well. Right? Imagine if, Vincent van Gogh, he's so good at painting. Was so good at painting. Imagine if he decided to leave that painting halfway. That masterpiece would not be here in this generation. He would not be known for the quality of work that he did. So Bhagavan says, when it is that you do someone else's duty, right, and you do that thing well, and it's worse than if you did your own duty, he says, Kurban karma swabhavaniyatam na apnoti kilbisham. He says that by performing the duty that is dictated by your own nature. Right, so if I'm attuned to making money, if I like to create opportunities, and I'm a Vaishya, then I should go and look at the duties that are in that classification and follow that thing properly. And by doing that, what happens? Na apnoti kilbisham. One does not incur any pap or sin. So this notion of sin we have to understand. In the Western world, right, we grow up with this notion of sin that, if I, tell a lie, then, I'll get demerit points. Or, if I tell too many lies and I drink too much, if I, do all wrong things in this world, then I'll go straight down to hell. Straight to hell I will go. Pap is really sin. Is really anything that takes you away from yourself. So when it is that I lie, right? When it is that I lie, then that means I'm creating an agitation in my mind because I have to remember that lie for the rest of my life. Then I have to figure out what lies have to be, fall in summation with that thing. I can't tell one person I was here and then the next day tell somebody else that I was somewhere else. I have to keep making up lies. So that agitation is there. Now, our true nature is Satchit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. Our nature is Shanti, peace. Agitation is something that is completely opposite to Shanti, completely opposite to peace, completely opposite to happiness, to bliss. So when it is that I commit this action and it takes me away from my true self, or from one step closer to that self, then what happens? Then that is what is noted as pap. And it's not that Bhagavan comes down with his thunderbolt to strike you. The law of karma is there for that. So by doing your own action, that thing will come back to you the same way. Right? Whether it be that you suffer from that lie mentally, that mental agitation, or somebody else lies to you, or somebody come and pinches you very hard, whatever it might be. That law of karma will play its role. So by doing your own duty, right, the one that is dictated to you by this classification, by this varna ashrama, then you don't incur any sin, which means that you don't lead to any sorrow or to any pain. Right? The swabhava of someone cannot destroy you. Like for instance, the fangs that are on that cobra snake. That thing is poisonous, no? Right? That fang, the teeth of a snake is poisonous. But that poison doesn't kill the snake. Right? Or Gurudev says, that the bacteria that's there in fermented wine is not drunk. Right? The very nature, now they are performing what their intrinsic nature is. That bacteria that's in that wine is supposed to ferment that thing and keep that thing in that state. And by doing that, then it is not affected by that thing at all. So your swabhav does not destroy you. Right? This notion of good or bad is something that we superimpose. It does not destroy you. So do your duty, do your swabhav, act according to your swabhav within your varna ashrama properly. And then you will not incur any type of sin or any type of pap, any type of agitation, sorrow, right? Misleading. Nothing like that. And then, some might ask that question, but my duty is riddled with evilness. My duty is so... one of the most interesting questions that have come up is, what about someone who builds nuclear bombs for a living? They build nuclear bombs for a living. What is their disposition? What are they supposed to do? So the question arises, but my duty is riddled with evil. So we chant that next verse, verse 48. Sahajam karma kaunteya
Sahajam karma kaunteya
saroshamapi natyajet
Sadoshamapi natyajet
sarvarambhi doshena
Sarvarambhi doshena
Dhumenagnivritaha
Dhumenagnivritaha.
So, Bhagavan says, Sahajam karma kaunteya, O son of Kunti. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, this natural action that's according to this varna ashrama that you've been through, that you've been assigned to, this kshatriya, right? Arjuna is a kshatriya. He's a warrior by birth, a soldier. He's very good. He was the best student in that under Dronacharya. You don't just become the best student just by flukes. There's some sort of natural inclination. They say if you love what you're doing, you never have to work a day in your life. That's how you know what your natural inclination is, what you just absolutely love to do. Some people, they can't wait to come home and cook. Some people can't wait to come home and eat. Right? Whatever it is that you love to do is what your natural inclination. It does not feel like work for you. It does not feel like you have to go out of your way. You don't drag your feet to do that thing. Some people love going to work on a Monday morning. Some people love because they love what they do. It's their natural inclination. So Bhagavan says that to Arjuna, he says, O Kaunteya, he says this natural action, the swabhav, according to that varna that you're born through, it has some defect with the three gunas. It might have some defect with this three gunas. But you do not give up on this karma. Right? You have to find out that sahaja karma. Sahaja karma means that spontaneous karma. Or that one that we are born with, that natural thing that we are born with. And you figure out what that natural tendency is, and then you perform that thing. Right? We keep repeating this over and over because Bhagavan can't express this enough. And it means that if it is, you have to make a lifestyle change. Right? That kshatriya has to be very courageous, and each of us has that classification. We have that ashramanas. We are kshatriyas at some level. So that courageousness needs to be there. Right? Will I make that lifestyle change to do what it is that I love as opposed to? Because when it is, it means that you have to have faith in Bhagwan. That surrender has to be there. Right? Some people, if we take this to the complete extreme, tomorrow they'll go and quit their job and then go and, pick up a pot and all the ingredients and start cooking. And they'll open up a shop, put a sign up in front and say, Sally's Roti Shop. Now, some people might say, but I have a steady income already as is. My job, I have a steady income. If I go and I do what I love, I don't know if I'll even live to see my income. Right? So unsure it is. But really that highest level of surrender, which we have to work towards. It's a stage that we work towards. Bhagwan provides at any turn. Swami Vivekananda, Swamiji told this story just recently. Swami Vivekananda, while he was, he had to travel from one point in India to another point, and I think that ride was about 20 hours or a few days. And in that time, there's no, form of communication to say pick up the phone and call, someone on the other side or call someone midpoint. So they said, Swami Vivekananda, he's ready to board that train. And then they said, but Swamiji, what will you eat for this time period? For this long time period, what is it that you will eat? And then Swamiji said, you don't worry, there's something Bhagwan will provide. You don't worry, leave it. And then he went on that train, and midway, somebody just walked onto that train. They stopped at a station, and somebody just walked onto that train who he had never met in his entire life. Never heard of that person, never met that person. And he said, I'm looking for Swami Vivekananda. And then Swamiji, poked his head out. And he said, I'm here. And he said, that man walked up and said, look, I brought you food. And he gave him the food and left. Now, how is that man to know that a Swami will be traveling on that train, in that cart, at that time, on that day? And there was no form of communication for that message to be sent in that short period of time. So, Bhagwan provided. Very easy. Swami Vivekananda, he completely surrendered. Now, after this story, Swami Prakashananda also said, don't say, oh, my name is Swami Vivekananda, and go live life saying Bhagwan will provide, and just wait for the next meal. That surrender, that mindset has to be there also. But what I'm saying is that natural tendency that you have, you can't suppress it. It will show itself at some point, whether it be that agitation of whatever action that you're doing, right? You want to be doing something else, but you have to be here doing this. And Bhagwan is saying that you figure out what that natural inclination is and you do that thing well. You do that duty properly. You do it according to the Shastras. If you're inclined to be a police officer, then that means that you follow all the rules of police work. It doesn't mean that you go and become a corrupt police officer. You say, well, I'm following my Swadharma. By doing it well means that you are following this Shastras, all the qualities that the Shastras teach us. So at our stage, we cannot give up karma. Just by breathing, we're doing an action. By having our eyes open, we are seeing or we're hearing. Those are all actions that we are engaged in. So we can't give up action. So we might as well do the correct thing. The correct thing meaning that it will take us on the path of purity of mind, take us on the path of jnana, closer to moksha. A nice example is in Gurudev, that posting was there yesterday or just recently. And it's, Lord Krishna has his flute. Lord Krishna has his flute and he plays through that flute. The sound comes out. Now imagine that flute decided to whistle its own tune one day. Lord Krishna is playing so beautifully for the gopis who are dancing around in complete bliss. And then one day that flute says, no. Today's my song, not yours, Bhagwan. Well, that will be cause for, disaster. The gopis would have had something to say about that. So, what Gurudev says is that we should be like the flutes in the hands of Bhagwan. Bhagwan has blessed us with this natural inclination. Right? We have an opportunity to express it. We have a field to express it upon. Right? We have the opportunities, the situations to express it through. And we should be like Lord Krishna's flute and let Bhagwan just play his tune through us. But what do? Our ego, our mind, our tendencies says, no, I would much rather do this instead. I would much rather, and we justify that thing so well. So Bhagavan says Gurudev says to be like that flute. When it is we try to be something that we are not, that paradharma, it's like, a little rabbit decides one day, I am going to be a lion today. I am not going to be a little rabbit, I'm going to be a lion. Or that tree, right, the tree outside decides, today I'm going to give water. I'm not going to give plants or fruits. I'm going to give water. So that tree has just taken up the swadharma of the river or the ocean. That's the incorrect thing. That rabbit is supposed to be quiet and cute, not loud and scary. So that is what that's what we do. We try to be a lion when really we're a rabbit. Or the other way around, whichever one. So Bhagavan says that that's the wrong thing. That's inferior to doing whatever your swadharma is, the correct way. So it's not just that we leave it at that, but it takes time, right? There's a process. So we meditate, right? We do japa, we do tapas. It requires fearlessness. It requires surrender. It requires faith. Meaning to imbibe those things. Everything's easier. I think it's like 22 times you have to do something before it becomes a true habit. And that was probably back then because there would have been less distractions. Now there are more. So it's probably more than 22 times we have to do something. And for moksha, it's lifetimes. It's lifetimes before we can get there. So there are stages that it will go through. And he says what? He says all actions are associated with some kind of defect. And then he gives the example like how fire is associated with smoke. So even though our duty is riddled with these three gunas which have its defect, every single action in this world has doshas attached to it. So for instance, this temple, right, this mandir was built. To build this mandir, right, the ground had to be dug, which meant that so many habitats were killed in the process. So the action, right, that karma of building this temple caused the death of, worms, caterpillars, beetles, cockroach, whatever it might have been. So it had its defect. But the point is that when we do this action, the intention behind what we're doing it with, is the correct type of mindset. Meaning that there's no attachments to it. We're not doing the wrong thing. We're doing the correct thing. And when that correct thing is expressed through us, when our swadharma is expressed through us, then it begins purity of mind. When that purity of mind is there, then there are no longer any identification with the ego. And when there's no identification with the ego, then that's called sannyas. Right? We go back to that beginning of chapter 18. And that's the state that we are trying to achieve. Have complete renunciation from any identification with this body, with this world, with our actions. But to get there, we have to take steps. So even if it is that you think that your action, that your duty is riddled with evil or defects, every single thing Bhagavan is saying is actually riddled with this defect. Every single thing is riddled with defects. So if you switch from this, then you're going into the same thing in a different environment. Then Bhagavan says, do exactly what you're supposed to do. You can't get away from it, so do it properly. And then we'll chant this verse 49. Asakta buddhi sarvatra,
asakta buddhi sarvatra,
jitatma vigata spraha,
jitatma vigata spriha,
neshkarmya siddhim paramam,
neshkarya siddhim paramam,
sannyasena digacchati.
sannyasena digacchati.
So what's the benefit of doing this, of imbibing our swadharma, figuring out what our swadharma is, and following the classifications the duties that are outlined by our classification? Bhagavan says, asakta buddhi sarvatra. It says that intellect is unattached to every single thing in this world. It's unattached, right? This ever-changing world, this temporary world, this world filled with sorrow. That intellect is unattached. If he performs what is natural to him, then there is no doership. Right? I just said that doership goes, that ego goes. So there's no attachment. Like, breathing, for instance. That's something that is so natural to each and every one of us. It's when you become conscious of it that you say, I have to breathe in and I have to breathe out. And then your breathing pattern changes. But essentially don't say, I'm breathing, I'm breathing, I'm breathing. That breathing happens naturally. Or now is, all the trees are blooming, the flowers are blooming. And you're just there in this world. We're just here in Trinidad. We don't have any sense of control or any sense of doership over that springtime bloom. Or what is it called? Exam time blooms. Right? We're in the presence of all this action taking place. So the same way Bhagavan says that this person his intellect is unattached to every single thing, sarvatra, everything in this world. And jitatma vigata spriha. So he has conquered all his senses, like that Brahmana has. He's conquered all his senses, meaning he no longer feels the need of gratification of our senses. When you think of a piece of cake, then we drive down to bakery treats. Right? Or when it is that we want, to see something nice, we go to the movies no matter what time of day it is. We leave work early also to go. So there's no sense of needing to gratify our sense organs. And he is completely desireless from this body, desireless from any other attachments in this world. And what happens to him? Adhigachati sannyasena. Through attaining the sannyas, through attaining this highest state of renunciation, paramam naiskarmya siddhim. Naiskarmya siddhim is a very nice word that Shankaracharya he expounds on. Actually, these verses, Sri Adi Shankaracharya did Bhashya. He did a commentary on this Bhagavad Gita. And these few verses are long, many, many pages. Purva Pakshi is there, he calls. Means that student who just has so many doubts and he keeps asking questions over and over. But you have to come to the Vedanta course to study that. But this one, Paramam, what happens to him? The one who has attained through attaining sannyas, he has that highest state. Paramam, he has the highest state, meaning that perfection in the sense and dropping of doership. He has attained the highest state of perfection. Now, nothing in this world is perfect. What do you mean he's attained perfection? Now, nothing is perfect in this world based on our conditionings, right? Our superimpositions. This sannyasi, he is not limited by these conditions at all whatsoever. No type of conditioning from his own personal view or from any external point of view. He has attained that highest state, and it's also a state of perfection, which means that it's not limited to any one person. It's the very nature of this universe. So everything is just happening around him. Any action that he does is just happening. He's in tune with the rest of the universe, with Bhagwan. Any action that he does is just for Loka Sangraha, for the rest of the world. That's like, if you saw that trailer or even saw the movie for On a Quest, that actionless action. Gurudev asks at the beginning, what is actionless action? Right, so you're performing the action, but it's actionless. There's no attachment, there's no doership attached to it. So that notion, that is what this sannyasi does. That's that man of perfection. Right? You'll see that in translations. That man of perfection, or state of perfection. Right? So that's when someone is established in their true nature, then they are only working through their actionless self. Bhagwan is only working through that actionless self. The reason why we say that we are doing action is because we have identification with it. That sannyasi has no identification with it. So it's actionless. So the performance of one duties as worship to Bhagwan, right? We offer all those duties back to Bhagwan. And those duties which arise from knowledge, because we have to study our ashramas, our Varna ashrama, then what does that lead to? To perfection. Perfection meaning enlightenment, freedom. Freedom from the duties also that sannyasi has. But freedom from agitation, sorrow, from all negative things and positive things in this world. Everything is as is. And then Bhagavan talks about, well, we can't just end at karma yoga. That's not where it ends. Bhagavan says, we'll have a long jivahood, so there's more to do. So tomorrow, Bhagavan will tell us about how it is that this sannyasi gains that abidance in knowledge and jnana. Right? Jnana yogini, right? So how is it that he becomes united with this knowledge?